Hi, my name is Hannah and welcome to Impressions of Time. Today I am going to be going over Berthe Morisot's history and her long-lasting but unknown effect on the Impressionist movement in the mid to late 1800s. And as I go over her history, I'm also going to be replicating this piece titled Woman at Her Toilet. And it's funny because I was originally going to replicate this piece, Rose's Tremieres, which I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but I hated the way it looked. I'll even put it here. This is how it looked originally. Big no thank you. Yeah, so then I went into the Women at Her Toilet, and as I replicate the pieces, I've kind of been asked what I use. On my TikTok, I talk about it a lot, but these are the pastels I use right now by Arteco. And they're like a 7 out of 10, but they're really cheap. This is how they look after loss of use. Yeah, so that's the palette. There's 50 pastels. I like the gold and silver one. I'm almost out of the white. And then this is the paper I use. And then I use it was like, well, I should say this was $10, the most expensive thing I've bought for my YouTube channel. And then I currently use a tripod from TikTok Shop. So, yeah. That's for those who have asked. That's pretty much it. I can't really talk about much else, otherwise you won't want to watch the rest of the video. Also, like many Impressionism artists, they're French, or they were in France, and we all know, based off of my past videos, that I don't speak French. So, I apologize. I probably butchered many French names, places, words, but it's just something you're gonna have to get used to, I guess. So, without further ado, I hope you like and subscribe. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you, bye.
When we picture the pioneers of Impressionism, a familiar set of names come to mind. Monet, Renoir, Degas, and Cezanne, a group of men who shattered the rules of the art world and rewrote the visual language of modern painting. But one of the movement's most original, radical, and emotionally intelligent voices rarely makes it into the spotlight. Her name was Berthe Morisot, a woman who fought quietly, painted boldly, and transformed the art of seeing. Her story is the art world's greatest contradiction. She was a founding member of the Impressionists, yet her name was often left out of the narrative. She exhibited more consistently with the group than many of her male peers, yet critics routinely dismissed her work as feminine, light, or unfinished. She embraced risk when many artists painted safely. She chased truth when others chased approval. She painted domestic life not because she was limited to it, but because no one before her had captured it with such honesty, intimacy, and insight. And hidden within her canvases, under the rapid strokes and shimmering light, are the deeper themes of her life. Duty versus ambition, constraint versus freedom, longing versus reality. This is not just the biography of a woman painter, this is the story of a revolutionary artist who refused to mirror the world. She interpreted it. A painter whose brush became a voice, a woman who lived in the margins but painted at the center, a creator who shaped Impressionism just as the men we memorize from textbooks. Today, we'll explore her upbringing, her challenges, her relationships, especially the complex and compelling one she shared with Edouard Manet. We'll walk through Paris during the birth of modern art. We'll look closely at her most iconic works, including The Cradle, Summer's Day, Rose's Tremieres, and, of course, Woman at Her Toilet. This is the story of Berthe Morisot, the woman who painted light as if it were alive. Berthe Marie Pauline Morisot was born on January 14, 1841 in Bourges, France. I'm gonna have that on the screen because I always mess it up. Into a cultural, comfortable Bourges family. Not aristocracy, but high enough socially that her future seemed laid out in front of her. Marriage, domesticity, respectability. But Berthe was not a girl who easily fit into paths others paved. Her father, a government official, and her mother, a well-educated woman with artistic leanings, believed in proper accomplishments for their daughters. Music, literature, languages, and importantly, drawing. For a young woman, drawing was considered an elegant pastime, something to fill idle hours and enhance marriage prospects. But from the moment Berthe touched charcoal to paper, something was different. Her talent was immediate, not just strong, urgent. She devoured technique. She pushed herself harder than her instructors demanded, and most importantly, she painted not to please, but because something inside her felt compelled. She and her sister Edma, also a talented artist, were enrolled in private lessons since women were banned from École des Beaux-Arts. Their mother hired respected tutors, eventually leading the girls to study with Camille Corot, one of the most influential landscape painters of the era. Corot wasn't just a teacher, he was a force. He took them outdoors to paint en plein air, capturing the changing air, shifting light, and fleeting moments of nature. This would later define Impressionism. For young Berthe, it was like discovering the world for the first time. But studying with Corot became a reality check. To be a woman artist in the 19th century was to fight against an almost universal skepticism. Women couldn't attend official academies, they were barred from life drawing classes, they weren't taken seriously as professionals. At best, society tolerated lady painters. At worst, it mocked them or ignored them altogether. Yet, despite the barriers, something unusual happened in the Morisot household. Her parents didn't discourage her. They didn't tell her to stop dreaming, they saw her skill, her drive, and her hunger to master the craft. Even so, expectations loomed. A respectable young woman could paint, but she wasn't supposed to pursue an art career. One biographer wrote, Berthe lived in a contradiction, encouraged to paint, but discouraged to become a painter. The tension between freedom and constraint would become one of the central emotional threads in her life, and in her art. Her canvases shimmer with light and openness, yet they are often framed within intimate domestic spaces. It's as if the boundaries around her became part of her visual language. And so, painting became not only her passion, but her quiet rebellion. By the late 1860s, Berthe was exhibiting at the Paris Salon, the official, prestigious, and notoriously conservative art show of the French Academy. Her works were praised for their sensitivity and technical finesse. But then something happened that would change the course of her life and her artistic evolution. She met Edouard Manet. Think of their first interaction like two flints striking, an immediate spark of artistic understanding mixed with mutual fascination. Manet was already famous and polarizing. The art establishment hated him. His paintings challenged tradition with their loose brushwork, unconventional subjects, bold contrasts, and modernity. Manet embodied rebellion. And what astonished him, truly astonished him, was that Berthe, a quiet, composed woman from a respectable family, painted with the same fearlessness he admired in the avant-garde. From the moment they met, Manet began painting her again and again. In fact, she appears in at least 12 of his works, more than any other model. But the way he painted her wasn't typical. She wasn't posed as a muse or an object of desire. She was portrayed as thoughtful, introspective, intense. There was something in her eyes, ambition, intelligence, a private inner life that Manet captured but did not define. Their relationship became one of the most discussed dynamics in the 19th century art history. Some speculate it was romantic, others argue it was purely intellectual and artistic. What we know for certain is this: their bond was electric, creative, challenging, sometimes tense. Manet often criticized her paintings, even painting over parts of them during visits, something that frustrated her deeply. Me too, girl. And yet, she influenced him just as much. Many scholars believe she pushed Manet towards lighter palettes, looser brushwork, and a more impressionistic sensibility. One historian wrote, Manet inspired Morisot, but Morisot inspired Manet. Their artistic dialogue was mutual, their respect was real, their impact on each other was profound, but here's the tragedy. Their closeness led many critics and even friends to misread her talent as secondary. Some wrote that she painted like Manet, as if he were the origin of her style rather than a collaborator. In reality, she had been painting with luminous, loose strokes long before they met. She didn't copy him. If anything, Manet was catching up. Still, society saw what it expected to see, a woman standing next to a man. But Berthe didn't let the shadows of assumptions dull her ambition. She was forging her own path, and one that would lead her into the center of a revolution. By the early 1870s, frustration with the saloon system was reaching a boiling point. The Academy favored dark colors, mythological scenes, heroic men, and moralistic narratives. Anything modern, emotional, or spontaneous was labeled unfinished. Monet, Renoir, Cezanne, Pissarro, Sisley, and Degas all had their works rejected or ridiculed. So in 1874, they said, enough. They organized their own exhibition, their own platform, their own artistic rebellion. And Berthe Morisot was one of the founding exhibitors. Let us pause for a moment and appreciate the magnitude of that. She wasn't invited politely afterward. She wasn't brought in as an afterthought. She was there from the very beginning, one of the engines of the movement. At the first Impressionist exhibition, she displayed the cradle, a luminous, intimate scene showing her sister Edma watching over her sleeping baby. It is soft, tender, emotional, and technically daring. The gossamer veil over the baby is painted with such delicacy it seems to move. Critics were confused, some were outraged. One wrote, "Morisot's paintings are sketches, unfinished, the work of a woman incapable of completing a thought." Yet another critic, one more perceptive, wrote, "Berthe Morisot is the one true Impressionist." And he wasn't wrong. Where Monet painted sunlight on water, Morisot painted sunlight on skin, fabric, emotion. Where Degas captured movement of bodies, Morisot captured movement of breeze, glances, relationships. Her art was Impressionism of the intimate world. And here's something remarkable. Of all the Impressionist painters, she is the only one who exhibited with the group every single time, except when she was ill after childbirth. That alone places her at the heart of the movement, not beside it, not behind it, but within it. Still, her gender shaped every critique. Her work was called feminine, not in praise, but as dismissal. Yet her style, the softness, the pale palette, the quick strokes, wasn't a limitation. It was her rebellion, her identity, her contribution. If Monet was the painter of water and Renoir the painter of joy, and Degas the painter of movement, then Berthe Morisot was the painter of light as emotion. In 1874, the same year as the first Impressionist exhibition, Berthe made a surprising decision. She married Eugene Monet, Edward's brother. It wasn't a marriage of convenience, it wasn't a fallback, it was love. Quiet, steady, supportive. Eugene was unlike most men of his time. He believed in her career, he managed her exhibitions, encouraged her, protected her emotional space, and never asked her to put down her brush. In 1878, their daughter Julie was born, and with her came a new chapter in Morisot's art. Julie became Berthe's muse, not in stage portraits, but in real-life moments. Julie reading, Julie daydreaming, Julie playing in the garden, Julie with friends. These were not sentimentalized visions of childhood, they were intimate glimpses into daily life. Her depictions of mothers and daughters are especially powerful. She didn't romanticize domesticity. She painted the exhaustion, the tenderness, and the quiet connections of women's lives. These were scenes male artists didn't witness, much less understand. Some critics dismissed her focus on domestic subjects, but modern scholars see it differently. They argue that Morisot expanded the field of Impressionism by bringing the private world into public artistic sphere. She was painting a reality overlooked because it belonged to women. And within that domestic world, she found moments of transcendence. Light falling across a child's dress, a mother's hand resting on her daughter's back, the shimmer of afternoon sun in a bedroom. Her palette lightened, her brushwork loosened, her paintings became even more atmospheric, almost dissolving at the edges. This wasn't weakness, it was mastery. She was making invisibility visible. In the midst of motherhood, she painted some of the strongest works of her career. Far from restricting her, motherhood enriched her vision. Before photography captured candid family moments, Morisot was already painting them. The cradle shows her sister Edma watching over her newborn. The composition is intimate, the mother's face reflected softly in the gauzy veil covering the baby. It's a scene that feels suspended in time, almost sacred. Her brushwork here is gentle but confident. The veil is a marvel. It seems weightless, almost translucent. Morisot doesn't outline shapes, she suggests them, letting the viewer fill in the details. This approach would become one of her trademarks, painting as perception, not representation. Morisot's painting, A Summer's Day, two women sit in a rowboat on a lake in the Bois de Boulogne. I'm going to add spelling for this too. This painting sparkles literally. The water isn't painted realistically. Instead, it's a field of quick, broken strokes that create the sensation of sunlight dancing on the surface. Notice the women's expressions. They aren't romanticized, they're thoughtful, present, slightly distant. Morisot was not painting decorative beauty, she was capturing mood. The vibrant blues and shimmering whites create movement, as if the boat is gently drifting. Rose's Tremere, one of her most exquisite floral works. At first glance, it seems simple. Tall hollyhocks, blooming against the sky, but the genius lies in how the flowers dissolve into color and air. There are hardly any outlines. Instead, the flowers emerge from loose strokes, almost vibrating with light. This is not a botanical study, it's a celebration of life, growth, sunlight, fragility. Morisot's flowers feel emotional. They're filled with energy. They're not static, they're breathing. Woman at her toilet is often compared to Renoir and Degas, but its psychology is distinctly Morisot. The woman isn't posing for a viewer, she's engaged. In a private moment, unaware she's being watched. The softness of the scene, the luminous pastels, and the flickering highlights on the wall all contribute to the feeling of fleetingness. Morisot mastered the art of painting the ephemeral, not because she couldn't paint detail, but because she was more interested in capturing atmosphere. This work is Impressionism distilled, the momentary, the luminous, the ever-changing. In her later works, Morisot's colors grew more delicate, almost ethereal. Julie, now a teenager, became a symbol of youth and transition. Julie, with her greyhound Laertes, balances adolescence and adulthood, stillness and emotion. The loose strokes suggest rather than describe. The bond between Julie and the dog is subtle but intimate. You can feel time passing in this painting, childhood fading into maturity. The 1890s brought sorrow. Eugene Monet died in 1892, leaving Berthe heartbroken but determined to stay strong for Julie. Despite her grief, she continued to paint. Some of her most atmospheric works comes from this period. But then, tragedy struck again. In 1895, Julie fell seriously ill with pneumonia. Berthe stayed by her bedside for days, refusing to leave. She eventually caught the same illness. At just 54 years old, Berthe Morisot died. Her final words, reportedly, were, "You see, this time I am going to die." Her death devastated the Impressionists. Monet, Renoir, and Degas all attended her funeral. They knew they had lost one of the greats. Julie, only 16 at the time, later wrote, "My mother wasn't talent itself. I feel I will never be worthy of her." Her passing marked the end of an era for Impressionism and the beginning of a long, unjust period of obscurity. For decades after her death, Berthe Morisot's name slipped into the margins. Museums acquired works by Monet and Renoir, but often overlooked Morisot. Critics wrote histories of Impressionism that centered men and treated her as a footnote, or worse, a muse. Why? Because she was a woman, because domestic subjects were undervalued, because her style was subtle rather than grand. But something extraordinary happened in the late 20th century. Art historians began reevaluating Impressionism. They saw how essential Morisot was to the movement, not as an outlier, but as a core innovator. Today, she's recognized as a founding Impressionist, a master of light, a pioneer of modern female representation, a painter whose technique was as radical as Monet's, a woman who shaped and expanded the movement. Her works now hang in major museums worldwide. Scholars praise her intuition, her emotion, her vision, and more importantly, people are finally beginning to see what her contemporaries missed. That Berthe Morisot wasn't just a great female painter, she was a great painter, period. Period poo. Berthe Morisot once wrote in her diary, "I don't think there has ever been a man who treated a woman as an equal, and that's all I would have asked, because I know I'm worth it." Her life and art reflect the truth of that statement. She lived with constraints, but she painted with freedom. Her canvases shimmer with air, light, and emotion. Her work is filled with movement, not because she's restless, but because she understood that life is always in motion. She didn't capture the world as it was, she captured the world as it felt. And in doing so, she became one of the greatest Impressionists, one whose legacy is finally receiving the light it deserves. Berthe Morisot taught us that beauty isn't bold, it's fleeting. That art isn't grand, it's intimate. That greatness isn't loud, it's luminous. She made light her language, she made emotion her canvas, and she made sure that even the quietest moments shine forever.
Okay, so you made it to the end of my video. Huge thank you. I'm so excited. This is the final piece. Up close. This was like incredibly daunting. I don't do people, but I am really, really proud of how it turned out. Here's the piece. I'm gonna also put up a comparison. But yeah, again, thank you so much for staying. If you made it all the way to the end and you didn't like and subscribe, maybe do those things, like, subscribe. But yeah, thank you so, so much, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. And if you're interested in hearing about other artists, please drop a comment below, and I will take them into account when I'm planning the next video for my channel. So, have a good one. Bye!